Okay, so now we're out on this large property. Now this property was halfway between Redland Bay and Carbrook, but off the highway. It was down a dirt road, probably about 3 kilometres down this dirt road, and it was down on the river, on the Logan River. Big old house, but it had huge big termite nests everywhere, like up on the roof and everywhere were these big termite nests. We had no electricity. We only had tank water and we didn't have a pump, so that was just gravity fed. But I didn't mind the country life. Well, I loved the country life. I loved the nature, and we had horses and we had cattle and pigs and a goat, chooks, ducks. We had it, which was great because I spent so much time with the animals. I found them very healing and soothing to me. So being out in the country and no close neighbours, of course, then the real fighting and the beatings and everything to us kids started, and between themselves. We were put to work. Obviously on a property, everybody works. You've all got to pull your weight, but we were put to work, and along came the stock whip. Now, as we would sit at the table and have our dinner, if any one of us spoke at the table, we would get the stock whip straight across our back. You don't speak at the table. Totally different nowadays. We encourage people to talk. We want to talk to our family. But no, not back then. We weren't allowed to talk. And if you didn't eat your dinner, stock whip straight across the back. They become more abusive as time went on. My first real recollection of my father starting to do these things to me, we were out on the first property, the farm, and so I was about 5 years of age. I went into his and mother's room one morning looking for my mother, but she wasn't in there. I don't know where she was. But he was still laying in bed. So he encouraged me to get up into the bed and have a cuddle. So I did. And then he encouraged me to, and pushed me down under the sheets to go down and kiss him in certain areas. I'm not going to go any further with that. I'll leave that up to your imagination. But then I was always told, it's a secret. You can't tell anybody. If you tell anybody, then you're not allowed to go and do this, or you're not allowed to have this ice cream, or you're not allowed to do something. So it was always like blackmail to get me to do what he wanted. We moved out there sort of part the way through the school year, and Mother wanted us to continue to go to the same school that we were at in town. So my stepfather used to take us to school. He would drop us off at school in Wynnum at 6 a.m. in the morning, because he'd drop us off on his way to work. And then he wouldn't pick us up until 6 o'clock at night. But from 6 a.m. in the morning until we did our classes, we were just left there to our own devices. Now, I was partway through year 2 and my sister was only in year 1, and of course my brother was in year 3. So of course kids are going to go exploring. So we did. We weren't supposed to. We were supposed to just sit on the front steps, and that's where we were supposed to stay. But we didn't. We went exploring. We never did anything wrong. We tried not to. But I remember one day my little sister, she got one of my stepfather's, plumbing crayons, plumbing chalk things. And she drew around one big line all the way around the outside of this brick school building. Well, of course, then the nuns told my parents, so then we got into trouble. All hell broke loose. But then for months after that, every morning and every afternoon, my brother and I, not so much my little sister because we should have known better, we were looking after her, we had to, with a toothbrush and soap kind of stuff, go round this building and scrub this line off. One afternoon when my stepfather picked us up from school, he'd been drinking for some reason. He was supposed to be at work, but he didn't go to work. He sat in the pub all day. And he picked us kids up from school a little bit earlier than normal because he obviously didn't go to work. And on the way home, he had my brother and little sister sit in the back of the car and me in the front. Now, he made me lay down on his lap with my head on his lap and a newspaper over my head. I would be sort of half crying and almost being sick, and my little sister, who was a bit feisty in the back, she kept saying, "What's happening to Loretta? Where's Loretta?" And he said, "She's just having a sleep. She's all right. But she's making a noise. She's having a dream." But I will leave the rest of that up to your imagination, what was going on. So when we moved out onto the property, they sold the family car and they bought this old Morris ute to bring stock feed home or whatever. But every Saturday, they used to go all the way to Beenleigh. Now, us three kids used to have to sit in the back of the ute all the way there, and they would go to the Royal Hotel in Beenleigh every Saturday from the time it opened until about just on dark it would be. But us kids, they used to park the car outside the window where they could see us. Us kids were locked in the front of the car in the heat, didn't matter, all through summer. We could see this little park just in front of us with swings and things, but we weren't allowed to get out of the car. And even to pee, we had a bucket in the back of the ute, and for either one of us to go to the toilet, we'd have to get the bucket out of the back, go to the toilet, tip it out on the grass, and then put it back in the back. And if we were lucky, they would remember to feed us. Now, feeding us would be one bottle, small bottle of soft drink between the three of us, and a pie or a sausage roll each. If we were lucky, we got that. And then, of course, it's time to go home. Rain, hail, sleet or snow, we sat in the back of that ute. And sometimes on their way home, he'd be swerving all over the road and we'd be going from side to side. And then, guaranteed, every Saturday night, there was an argument. Through wintertime and on low tide, and down near the mudflats and that, we were given a newspaper, box of matches, a Hessian bag each. Now, we're only 5, 6 and 7 years of age, I suppose, at this time, and we were given this match and go down and burn the bottom paddock or the mudflats or, whatever it was. So we'd go and dip our Hessian bags in the river, and then we'd come back and we'd light the mudflats and the bottom paddock and let it burn, and we'd be there stumping it out and things. I used to love that. It was fun. I still like fires. I love sitting around a fire. I've had so many big bonfires in my life, and I do love the fire. But you've got to do it at safe times. Some people light fires at the wrong time of the year, obviously, and that's how we have horrific bushfires. But fires are good. I remember my parents put on some big party out there one night. I don't know what it was in aid of, but I remember there was a huge argument with everybody broke out. And but whenever people were around, us kids were always locked in our bedroom. We were never allowed to play with other kids at home, or even our cousins or whatever who would come out. Not that they came out very often, because we just didn't socialise with them. But this night there was this huge big argument, and everybody was punching the hell out of everybody, and I don't know what it was over, but I have a feeling that my parents were actually swingers. So it could have been something like that. I don't know. But nobody ever really came out to visit us, or they never really had parties or anything after that. That sort of finished a social thing with them, I suppose. So I'm going to leave that kind of thing just alone there for a little bit and tell you about some fun things that we used to do. after our jobs were all finished and whatever, and if the tide was in, because we had mud flats, we had the Logan River and then there was like a big mud flat, and then of course our paddocks and that started. So when the high tide was in, we were allowed to go swimming only in the mud flats. And our goat, she used to come down and swim with us too, which was really quite good. She'd go running through the water, but one day, because we had our own jetty onto the river, one day there'd been some fishermen down there, and a couple of days later, I found this little puppy in the mud, and I took him up to the house, and found this little puppy, and we asked around fishermen and the neighbours if they'd lost a puppy, but they hadn't. So we were allowed to keep him, and we called him Digger, and he was just the best dog. He used to come with us kids everywhere we would go.